The sky over the Western Front on this cold October morning in 1917 was a canvas of grey, streaked with the angry black puffs of anti-aircraft fire. High above the muddy trenches and the endless lines of barbed wire, a lone Sopwith Camel fighter plane danced through the clouds. Its engine roared a defiant song against the backdrop of distant artillery. Inside the cramped cockpit, a young man scanned the horizon, his eyes sharp and focused. He was looking for the telltale glint of sunlight on an enemy wing, the dark shape of a German albatross emerging from the haze. This pilot was different from every other man flying for the Royal Flying Corps. He was the only one who wore a turban, a symbol of his Sikh faith, under a specially designed flying helmet. His name was Hardit Singh Malik, and he was a warrior in a war that was not his own, fighting for an empire that often refused to see him as an equal. He was India's first fighter pilot, a pioneer carving a path through the hostile European sky. The air was thin and bitingly cold at 15,000 feet. Malik adjusted his goggles, his gloved hands steady on the controls of his temperamental aircraft. The Sopwith Camel was a notoriously difficult machine to fly, prone to spinning out of control if handled without absolute precision. Yet in its quirks lay its strength. It could turn on a sixpence, making it a formidable dogfighter in the hands of a skilled pilot. Malik had mastered its eccentricities, feeling the plane as an extension of his own body. He was not just a pilot, he was a hunter. Below him lay a world of chaos and death, a brutal stalemate that had consumed millions. But up here, in the vast empty expanse of the sky, there was a strange and terrible beauty. It was a deadly arena where courage, skill, and luck were the only currencies that mattered. He was a long way from his home in Rawalpindi, a world away from the life of privilege and study he had known. Suddenly, he saw them. A squadron of German fighters, flying in a disciplined formation, their fuselages marked with the stark black cross of the Luftstreitkräfte. They were like a pack of wolves, confident and deadly. For a moment, the sheer number of them was daunting. A lone camel against a flight of albatross fighters was a suicidal proposition. But retreat was not in Hardit Singh Malik's nature. He had fought too hard to get here, overcome too many barriers of prejudice and doubt just to earn his wings. He would not turn back now. He pushed the throttle forward, the engine screaming in response as he climbed for a tactical advantage, positioning himself with the sun at his back. He was one man, representing a nation of millions, and he would show the world what an Indian was capable of. His heart pounded against his ribs, a steady drumbeat of adrenaline and resolve. This was the ultimate test. It was not just about survival, it was about pride. Every flight was a statement, every patrol a quiet act of defiance against those who believed his kind did not belong in a cockpit. He gripped the joystick, his thumb hovering over the button that would unleash a torrent of bullets from his twin Vickers machine guns. The German planes grew larger in his sights. The moment of truth was approaching, a violent ballet of machines and men that would be decided in a matter of seconds. In that intense, life-or-death moment, Hardit Singh Malik was not just an officer of the Royal Flying Corps. He was the Flying Sikh, a legend in the making, soaring high above a broken world. Long before he ever sat in the cockpit of a Sopwith Camel, Hardit Singh Malik was a brilliant student with a dream. Born into a distinguished family in British India, he was afforded an education that few could dream of. He arrived in England as a teenager, a bright-eyed and ambitious young man destined for greatness. He excelled at his studies, eventually making his way to Balliol College, Oxford, one of the most prestigious universities in the world. He was a natural athlete, a gifted scholar, and a popular student. When the Great War erupted in 1914, a wave of patriotic fervour swept through Britain, and many of Malik's university friends rushed to enlist. Inspired by their example and a deep sense of duty, Malik too felt the call to serve. He wanted to fly, to join the nascent Royal Flying Corps and take to the skies. His application, however, was met with a wall of silent, institutional resistance. The British military, for all its need for able-bodied men, was steeped in the racial prejudices of the era. An Indian officer, a man with brown skin, commanding a sophisticated piece of war machinery, was an idea that many in the War Office found unsettling. His applications were ignored, misplaced, or outright rejected without proper cause. While his white British classmates were being accepted into flight training, Malik was left in a frustrating limbo. He was told in no uncertain terms that there was no place for an Indian in the Royal Flying Corps. The rejection was a bitter pill to swallow. It was a stark reminder that despite his education and his loyalty, he would always be seen as different, as somehow lesser in the eyes of the Empire. Undeterred by the racism he faced in Britain, Malik's determination only hardened. He was not a man to accept no for an answer, especially when that no was rooted in ignorance. He decided that if the British would not have him, perhaps their allies would. He traveled to France and offered his services to the French Air Force, the Aéronautique Militaire. The French were more pragmatic. They saw a capable and eager volunteer, not the color of his skin. They accepted him, and he began his training, proving to be a natural pilot. News of this soon filtered back to London. The idea of a British subject, an Oxford man no less, flying for the French was a source of considerable embarrassment for the British establishment. It highlighted their own petty prejudices in a way that words never could. The pressure mounted on the Royal Flying Corps. Malik's former tutor at Oxford, a highly influential figure, personally appealed to the head of the RFC, General David Henderson. The general, facing the dual pressures of public embarrassment and a desperate need for more pilots to replace the mounting casualties on the Western Front, finally relented. The official policy was quietly overturned. An offer was extended to Hardit Singh Malik come back and fly for Britain. It was a significant victory, not just for Malik, but for all the colonial subjects who had been denied the opportunity to serve on equal terms. He had forced the hand of an empire, using his quiet persistence to break down a formidable racial barrier. His journey to the cockpit was a battle in itself, one he had to win before he ever faced a single enemy in the air. When Hardit Singh Malik officially joined the Royal Flying Corps, he faced a new and unexpected challenge, one that went to the very heart of his identity. The standard issue flight gear included a snug-fitting leather helmet and goggles, essential for protecting a pilot from the freezing wind and engine oil that sprayed back into the open cockpit. However, for Malik, this presented a serious problem. As a devout Sikh, his turban was not merely a piece of headwear, it was a sacred article of his faith, a non-negotiable symbol of his honor, courage, and commitment to his beliefs. To remove it was unthinkable. He explained this to his commanding officers, making it clear that he could not and would not abandon this central tenet of his identity. He had fought for the right to fly as an Indian, and he would fly as a Sikh. This posed a unique logistical puzzle for the RFC. There were no regulations for a situation like this because there had never been a pilot like Hardit Singh Malik before. Some officers were inflexible, insisting that military regulations had to be followed to the letter. But Malik stood his ground with quiet dignity and unshakable resolve. He proposed a solution himself. He suggested that a specially designed, oversized flying helmet could be fashioned to fit over his turban. It was a practical and elegant compromise, one that would allow him to meet the safety requirements of the RFC without compromising the sacred duties of his faith. His superiors, perhaps impressed by his principled stand or simply wanting to avoid another controversy, agreed to the accommodation. And so, the Flying Sikh was truly born. Mechanics and leatherworkers were tasked with creating a custom piece of equipment, a unique helmet for a unique pilot. This bespoke helmet became a powerful symbol. It represented a bridge between two worlds, the ancient traditions of his Sikh heritage and the modern technological reality of aerial warfare. Every time he climbed into his Sopwith camel, he did so not by shedding his identity, but by adapting the world around him to fit it. His turban, neatly wrapped and protected beneath the leather helmet, became his most recognizable feature. It announced to the world that it was possible to serve a foreign empire and fight in its wars while remaining steadfastly true to one's own culture and faith. This small act of defiance had a profound impact. On the airfields of France, among the other pilots, it made him stand out. At first, it might have been a source of curiosity, but it quickly became a mark of respect. His fellow pilots saw a man of deep principle, someone whose courage was not just displayed in the heat of battle, but in his daily commitment to his beliefs. The image of Malik, walking to his aircraft with his turbaned head held high, was a powerful one. It challenged the very notion of what a British hero should look like. He was proving that bravery had no uniform, and that the skies were open to anyone with the skill and the heart to conquer them, regardless of their creed or the headwear they chose to don. Hardit Singh Malik quickly proved that his value to the Royal Flying Corps extended far beyond his symbolic importance. He was an exceptionally talented pilot, possessing the natural instincts, steady nerves, and aggressive spirit that separated the aces from the casualties. Assigned to No. 28 Squadron, he was thrust into the brutal air war over Flanders, where life expectancy for a new pilot was measured in weeks. The skies were a chaotic melee of dogfights, a deadly game of high-speed chess where a single mistake meant a fiery death. Malik, flying his trusty Sopwith Camel, adapted quickly to this unforgiving environment. He learned to use the camel's incredible agility to his advantage, outturning his German adversaries and getting on their tails before they knew what was happening. His first confirmed aerial victory was a moment of intense, violent clarity. On a patrol deep behind enemy lines, his flight was ambushed by a group of German fighters. The sky erupted into a swirling dogfight. Planes wheeled and dived, traces of machine gun fire stitching patterns across the clouds. Malik singled out an enemy aircraft, a German Albatross, and gave chase. The German pilot was skilled, throwing his plane into a series of desperate maneuvers to shake Malik off his tail, but Malik was relentless. He stuck to him like a shadow, anticipating his every move, closing the distance until the black cross on the enemy's fuselage filled his gun sight. He squeezed the trigger, and his twin Vickers guns roared to life, sending a stream of .303 caliber bullets tearing into the German plane. He watched as pieces of the Albatross's wing shredded away, and a plume of black smoke began to pour from its engine. The enemy plane faltered, its nose dropping as it began a fatal, spinning descent toward the scarred earth below. The sight was both exhilarating and sobering. He had taken a life, but in doing so, he had saved his own and those of his comrades. It was the brutal calculus of war. He had proven himself in the crucible of combat. He was no longer just a trainee or a novelty. He was a combat pilot, a killer of enemy airmen. This victory earned him the respect of his squadron mates and the attention of his commanders. He was not just the Indian pilot. He was a pilot who could get the job done. This success was just the beginning. Malik went on to fly numerous combat missions, his courage and skill tested time and again. He was involved in several more dogfights, and while official records from that chaotic period are often incomplete, he was credited with shooting down multiple enemy aircraft. He flew with a cool head and a steady hand, earning a reputation as a reliable and fearless wingman. His bravery was not reckless. It was calculated and professional. He understood the risks but did not shy away from them. In the lethal skies of the Western Front, where so many young men perished, Hardit Singh Malik not only survived but thrived, proving that skill and courage knew no race or religion. For Hardit Singh Malik, every day was a battle fought on two distinct fronts. The first war was the one visible to all, the visceral life-and-death struggle waged in the skies against the pilots of Kaiser Wilhelm II's Germany. This was a war of machines and bullets, of altitude and airspeed fought in the freezing, unforgiving expanse above the trenches. It demanded immense physical courage, lightning-fast reflexes, and an unshakable nerve. Malik faced this war with the same bravery as any of his comrades in the Royal Flying Corps. He hunted German observation balloons, escorted lumbering bombers on their perilous missions, and engaged in terrifying one-on-one dogfights where the stakes were absolute. This was the war for which he wore his uniform, the conflict that defined his role as a soldier. The second war, however, was a quieter, more insidious, and deeply personal struggle. It was the war he fought on the ground, every single day, against the pervasive prejudice and systemic racism of the era. This battle was not fought with machine guns, but with dignity, persistence, and an unwavering belief in his own worth. It began with his fight just to be accepted into the RFC, a battle against an institution that initially saw him as unfit simply because of his Indian heritage. Even after earning his wings, the fight continued. He had to constantly prove himself, to work twice as hard to gain the same recognition as his white peers. Every successful mission, every display of skill, was not just a victory against the Germans. It was a victory against the low expectations and hidden biases of some within his own side. This dual conflict was a heavy burden to bear. While other pilots had only to worry about the enemy in the sky, Malik had to navigate a complex social landscape on the ground. He endured the subtle slights, the condescending remarks, and the simple ignorance of those who could not see past the color of his skin or the turban on his head. Yet, he never allowed bitterness to consume him. Instead, he met prejudice with excellence. His response to doubt was to be a better pilot. His answer to ignorance was to carry himself with an unassailable grace and professionalism. He understood that his performance in the cockpit was the most powerful argument he could make for equality and respect. His actions spoke far louder than any words of protest. In this sense, his Sopwith Camel was more than just a weapon of war. It was his platform, high above the world, the meritocracy in the sky, the ground-level prejudices and the seemed to fade away. Up there, it did not matter all that mattered was how By excelling in this arena, Malik directly challenged the racist ideologies that underpinned colonial rule. He demonstrated, in the most dramatic way possible, that Indians were not just subjects to be ruled, but were equals, capable of mastering the most advanced technologies and excelling in the most demanding of professions. He was fighting for the freedom of Europe and, in his own way, for the future freedom and dignity of his own people. The air war on the Western Front was, honestly, a constantly evolving technological arms race. For a while, the Sopwith Camel gave the Allies an edge, but, the Germans soon responded with a new and superior aircraft, the Fokker D.7. This plane really was a game-changer. It could climb faster, fly higher, and was more stable in a dive than the Allied fighters, making it an incredibly deadly opponent. The arrival of the Fokker D.7 in large numbers in 1918 kicked off a period known as the Fokker Scourge, a time of heavy losses for the Royal Flying Corps. Allied pilots suddenly found themselves outmatched, with their familiar tactics basically rendered obsolete. It was a period of immense danger and fear, where simply surviving a patrol was a significant achievement. It was during this perilous time that my courage and skill were tested to their absolute limits. On one fateful mission, my squadron was attacked by a large formation of the dreaded Fokker D.Funts, led by one of Germany's top aces. The ensuing dogfight was a desperate, swirling chaos. I found myself in a life-or-death duel, my camel pushed to its breaking point as I tried to evade the superior German fighter. Despite my skillful flying, the Fokker's performance was just too much. A burst of machine gun fire ripped through my aircraft. I felt a searing pain as bullets tore through my leg, shattering the bone. My plane was riddled with over 400 bullet holes, its controls barely responsive. Wounded, bleeding, and flying a crippled machine, I faced a grim choice. Bailing out over enemy territory meant certain capture. I refused to become a prisoner of war. Fueled by adrenaline and sheer force of will, I wrestled with the controls, somehow managing to keep my battered Sopwith Camel airborne. I turned my plane back towards the Allied lines, a journey of agonizing slowness. Every moment I expected my engine to fail or for my damaged aircraft to just fall apart in mid-air. I flew on, losing altitude, my vision blurring from the pain and loss of blood, but my determination never wavered. I was focused on one thing only: getting home. Miraculously, I managed to cross back over the trenches and crash-land my plane behind the French lines. I was pulled from the wreckage, barely conscious but alive. The French soldiers who rescued me were astounded. First, by the sight of my turban, and second, by the fact that anyone could have survived flying an aircraft so thoroughly shot to pieces. The bullets in my leg would end my combat career in the Great War, but my survival was a testament to my incredible fortitude and piloting skill. I had faced the best the enemy had to offer in their most advanced machine, and had lived to tell the tale. The war had left its permanent mark on me, but I had emerged from its crucible, a survivor and, I suppose, a hero. My story was more than just a tale of individual bravery. It resonated far beyond the battlefields of France. In an era when the British Empire projected an image of absolute superiority, my very presence in a Royal Flying Corps cockpit was a powerful act of defiance. I was a living, breathing contradiction to the colonial narrative that portrayed Indians and other colonial subjects as incapable of handling complex technology or leadership roles. News of my exploits, the flying Sikh who fought bravely for the empire, filtered back to India. For a generation of young Indians living under British rule, I became an electrifying symbol of hope and possibility. I was proof that we were second to none. My steadfast commitment to my Sikh faith, especially my insistence on wearing my turban, added another layer to my legacy. I demonstrated that one did not need to abandon their cultural or religious identity to succeed in the Western world. I refused to assimilate in a way that would erase who I was. This was a profoundly important message for a colonized people, who were often pressured to adopt the customs and manners of their rulers just to get ahead. I showed that it was possible to be both modern and traditional, to be a fighter pilot and a devout Sikh. My custom-made helmet, worn over my turban, was a perfect metaphor for this synthesis, a blending of worlds on my own terms. Within the armed forces, my success had a tangible impact. By breaking the color barrier in the Royal Flying Corps, I paved the way for other men of color to follow. My performance, and that of other Indian soldiers who served with distinction in World War I, forced a slow, grudging reassessment of racial policies within the British military. I challenged the stereotype of the martial races, the colonial idea that only certain Indian ethnic groups were fit for fighting. As an educated man from a non-traditional background in military service, I proved that courage and capability were not determined by caste or creed. I helped to crack open a door that had been firmly shut, creating opportunities for future generations. My story became a source of immense pride, not just for Sikhs or Indians, but for people all over the world who faced discrimination. I was an inspiration for anyone who had ever been told they couldn't do something because of where they came from, what they looked like, or what they believed. My journey showed that barriers of prejudice, no matter how entrenched, could be overcome through a combination of talent, perseverance, and an unshakable sense of self-worth. I was a hero who fought two wars simultaneously and emerged victorious from both, leaving a legacy that inspired people to rethink the very definition of who could be a hero. The end of the First World War marked the end of my career as a fighter pilot, but honestly, it was merely the beginning of a long and distinguished life of public service. The same intelligence, determination, and quiet dignity that had defined me in the cockpit would go on to define my career as a diplomat. After the war, with 2 German bullets still lodged in my leg as a permanent reminder of my service, I joined the Indian Civil Service. This was the elite administrative body that governed British India, and once again I found myself a pioneer. I was one of the very few Indians to reach the highest echelons of a system designed to be run by the British. My career in the ICS was, well, stellar. I served in various high-profile positions, earning a reputation for my integrity, sharp intellect, and administrative skill. When India finally gained its independence in 1947, a dream I had quietly nurtured, I was perfectly positioned to serve my newly freed nation on the world stage. I seamlessly transitioned into the Indian Foreign Service, becoming one of India's first and most respected diplomats. My wartime experience and my Oxford education had given me a unique understanding of the Western world, making me an invaluable asset to Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's new government as it navigated the complexities of the post-war global order. As a diplomat, I served as India's High Commissioner to Canada and later as the Ambassador to France. It was a fitting appointment, returning as an ambassador to the country that had first been willing to give me a chance to fly. In these roles, I was no longer fighting in a war of bullets, but in a war of ideas, representing India's interests with eloquence and grace. I helped build bridges between India and the West, fostering relationships based on mutual respect rather than the old colonial dynamic. The young man who had once fought to be seen as an equal now sat at the table with world leaders, the proud representative of a sovereign nation of hundreds of millions. My life after the war demonstrates that my courage was not confined to the battlefield. It took a different kind of bravery to serve within the colonial system and then help to build a new nation from its ashes. I lived an incredibly full life, witnessing monumental changes in the world and playing a significant part in them. From the violent skies over Flanders to the polished halls of international diplomacy, my journey was a remarkable one. I passed away in 1985 at the age of 90, having lived a life that spanned empires, wars, and the birth of a new India. My service to my country continued long after I hung up my flying helmet, leaving a legacy of both martial valor and diplomatic wisdom. The story of Hardit Singh Malik, the Flying Sikh, is more than just a fascinating footnote in the history of the First World War. It is, honestly, a timeless and powerful lesson about the human spirit's ability to triumph over adversity. My legacy is not just about the German planes I fought or the missions I flew. It is about the invisible barriers I shattered on the ground. I proved through my actions that greatness is not limited by race, religion, or the circumstances of one's birth. In an age of division and prejudice, I demonstrated that courage, skill, and character are the true measures of a person. My life stands as a powerful testament to the idea that one person's determination can change the world, even if only by a small degree. For young people in India and across the diaspora, my life is a profound source of inspiration. I am a hero they can see themselves in. I showed that it is possible to navigate a world that may not always be welcoming without sacrificing one's core identity. My turban was not an obstacle to my success. It was an integral part of it. I teach a vital lesson, that one's heritage is a source of strength, not a weakness. In a globalized world where young people often struggle with questions of identity and belonging, my example shows a path forward, one of pride, resilience, and unapologetic self-acceptance. I am a role model who proves you can achieve your dreams on your own terms. My legacy also serves as a crucial reminder of the forgotten contributions of soldiers from across the British Empire. The history of the World Wars is often told from a purely European perspective, overlooking the millions of soldiers from India, Africa, and the Caribbean who fought and died for the Allied cause. My story helps to correct this historical imbalance, bringing to light the diverse faces of heroism. I ensure that we remember that the fight for freedom was a global one, fought by people of all colors and creeds. My presence in the sky over Europe was a symbol of this shared struggle, and my memory helps us to build a more complete and honest understanding of our collective past. Ultimately, the message of my life is one of boundless possibility. I was a man who refused to be told what I could or could not do. When one door was closed to me, I found another way. I flew over the trenches of war and soared over the barriers of racism. My life proves that no obstacle is too great to overcome with enough courage and perseverance. The sky was not my limit, it was my stage. Long after the roar of my Sopwith camel has faded into silence, the legacy of the Flying Sikh continues to soar, inspiring all who hear my story to aim higher, to fight for their beliefs, and to never, ever give up on their dreams.